Well, good morning, my fellow patriots. Welcome to the 356th consecutive Friday meeting of the East Valley Red Friday Patriots. It's truly great to have all 102 of you present this morning. Thank you for joining us to demonstrate your support for the mission of R.E.D. to remember everyone deployed. You know, since 1776, the United States has been at peace for only 20 years total, meaning it has been involved in wars or armed conflicts for virtually all of its history. Out of 250 years, the U.S. has spent approximately 230 years in some form of active military conflict. And today, we are witnessing yet again a significant armed conflict in the Middle East. Armed conflict seems never ending. Many of you in this room are veterans of armed conflict and have witnessed firsthand the consequences of battle. When deployed, most of you were in your prime as teenagers or possibly in early adulthood. You served, you survived, you returned, and some didn't. But you picked up the pieces and went on with your lives. By far, the majority of you combat veterans in this room are Vietnam War veterans. And this coming Sunday, March 29, America will commemorate your service to our nation on National Vietnam War Veterans Day. Commemoration that's long overdue. You know, National Vietnam War Veterans Day was approved by Congress as a permanent annual recognition when it passed the Vietnam War Veterans Recognition Act of 2017. Donald Trump signed the legislation into law on March 28, 2017. March 29 was chosen because on that day in 1973, the last U.S. combat troops departed Vietnam, and the last prisoners of war held in North Vietnam arrived on American soil. Back in the early 1970s, military personnel that were returning from Vietnam asked singer-songwriter Billy Joel to write a song about them. Some of those returning warriors were friends of Billy Joel. Joel listened to many of their personal stories and began work on the song. The song, Good Night, Saigon, written and produced by Joel, is from Billy's 1982 album, The Nylon Curtain. This song follows a group of United States Marines beginning their military training on Parris Island and then on into various situations of warfare. Let's take a moment and listen to Billy Joel's Good Night, Saigon. Will you join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to share a few statistics with you about the Vietnam War era. Of the 8.7 million American military personnel on active duty during the Vietnam War era of August 5, 1964 through March 28, 1973, roughly 3.4 million served in the Southeast Asia theater, which included Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand-based flight crews, and sailors in surrounding waters. Approximately 2.7 million of the 3.4 million served within the Vietnam borders. In other words, 39% of all U.S. active duty personnel served in theater during that 9-year period of the Vietnam War, and 31% served within the borders of Vietnam. The other 5.3 million service members, in other words, 61% of the active duty U.S. troops during that 9-year period, were either stationed within the United States or deployed globally, maintaining Cold War commitments in Europe, the rest of Asia, and other locations. As to in-theater branch of service, the United States Army represented 1,736,000 troops, Marines 498,000, Air Force 385,000, Navy 514,000, and Coast Guard 8,000. In total, 58,220 Americans were killed, 300,000 wounded, and 75,000 were severely disabled during that conflict. So I would ask, if you are a Vietnam War combat veteran that served in theater during that period of 1964 through 1973, please come forward and stand here in front of the stage. Gentlemen, we sincerely appreciate the service that you have dedicated to the defense of this nation. May I have a hooah for these men and women? Please remain where you are, gentlemen. Now, if you are a veteran or Vietnam-era veteran who served during the period of August 1964 through March 1973, regardless of where you may have served, will you please come forward? May I have an ooh for these Vietnam-era vets? To each of you, thank you for your honorable service to our country, and we wish to take this opportunity to present each of you with a memento of our appreciation. This is a challenge coin that states 50th Anniversary Vietnam War, March 29, 2023, and welcome home. Some gave all gave some. Ladies, please distribute the coins. By the way, I want to thank Nancy Fassbender for supplying those challenge coins. Nancy, thank you very much. I do want to introduce a guest that we have with us this morning. I want to introduce Roger Peterson. Roger, will you please stand? Roger, I see here that you served in the United States Marine Corps. Is that correct?
Correct.
And not only did you serve in the United States Marine Corps, you served for 40 years, from 1955 to 1995. I thought most Marines were worn out after 30. So you were a commissioned officer in the United States Marine Corps.
Yes.
And I see that you were joining our group of Vietnam-era veterans. Just out of curiosity, were you deployed to any other conflicts during your service years?
No.
Well, thank you for your service to this country. Thank you for the 40 years of honorable service. Glad to have you with us and hope that you'll return. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a hoo-ah for Roger? You know, I looked down here initially on this contact data form, and I saw that United States Air Force had been scratched out with Marines on top of that. And I come to find out that his buddy that sponsored him here today had thought that he served in the Air Force all that time. Wow. I'm privileged to introduce our speaker for today's program, Terry Araman. Terry is a native of San Francisco who served 3 years as an Army medic, including service within the 9th Infantry Division, Vietnam, 1968 to 69. Terry truly represents the epitome of a veterans advocate and has served his nation, state, and community in a variety of roles in support of our veterans. As past director of Madison Street Veterans Association of Phoenix, a homeless veteran service organization, Terry led the efforts to establish Manna House. MANA is an acronym for Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force. It is a transitional living center housing 52 homeless veterans. In 2011, Terry was honored in D.C. at the White House as a champion of change. And Terry's volunteer accomplishments include 16 years with the Sun Sounds radio reading service for blind and print handicapped persons. He has been a member of Amnesty International, which is a human rights organization, including 4 years as the Phoenix Group Coordinator. Terry served for 9 years as adjunct faculty at Mesa Community College, teaching business classes, including supply chain management. But Terry is currently serving on the Veteran Advisory Councils for Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego and Congressman Greg Stanton, and in 2023 was invited to participate on the Veterans and Military Families Advisory Council for Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays. Terry currently chairs that committee. Terry is past vice president or vice chair and past legislative liaison for Unified Arizona Veterans and was inducted into the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame in 2016. Terry Araman continues to dedicate his life to making homeless veterans whole again with shelter, healing, education, and employment. And in 2020, Terry joined the City of Phoenix Military Veteran Advisory Commission and became a board member of Brighter Way Institute and Keys to Change, the Human Services Campus in Phoenix. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Terry Araman.
You guys are so high tech. You know, I've been to a lot of different veteran organizations, and they're not as together as you guys are. So, and thank you so much for going through the introduction. One of the things I've learned, I mean, I'm going to be 79 in July. I had to think for a minute. And, you know, the older you get, the longer your bio gets, you know, because you've been around a long time and you're doing all this kind of stuff. And after a while, nobody wants to hear it anymore because it's just too long. So I usually try to shorten it and leave some of the stuff out. But I'm honored to be here this morning, especially on this commemoration of the end of the Vietnam War. And what an incredible group. I've been working somewhat with Veterans Affinity Group. Rick Kryberg goes out to different organizations like this one. I'm surprised he hasn't been here yet. Oh, he has? Okay, good deal. Yeah, and also at the Veterans Home near the VA facility in Phoenix. So it's always gratifying when you get together with other veterans. I was talking to a civilian, somebody that had never been in the military recently, and I said, you know, I can go to any veteran organization anywhere in the country and walk in and feel completely at home. And they couldn't understand that. That's because they'd never been in the military. But I'm sure you've all had that same experience. Wherever you go, veterans are veterans. We have a common language, common history, all of that kind of thing. And what a joy that is to have, to be able to sort of tap into that when we need to. So thank you all for the warm welcome I received this morning and the wonderful breakfast. So never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. How many of you are familiar with that saying? That's the dividing principle of the Vietnam Veterans of America and has been for a number of years. And with as many Vietnam veterans as we have in this hall this morning, I'm sure you understand why. When a lot of us came back from Vietnam, the reception was anything but friendly. In fact, it took a long time before I would even tell people that I had been in the military or certainly had been to Vietnam because the reaction was so negative. I had to learn how to open up about that when I started working with veterans about 20 years ago, when I retired from corporate America and went and volunteered at the Human Service Campuses for all homeless people. And I was shocked when I got there and discovered how large of the population were veterans. And I said, you know, I need to do something about this or help with that. So we started an organization called the Madison Street Veterans Association. Madison Street because we were living in an old abandoned warehouse building on Madison Street, and there were about 80 veterans, homeless veterans, living in that facility at that time. And I'm starting at the end of the story, but I think this is important. The veterans got together and said, you know, we can help ourselves. And they went to the staff that was running that facility and said, you know, we're veterans. We know how to support ourselves. We know how to help each other. There were some veterans that were in that facility that were disabled and needed help and support, and we knew how to take care of them. You know, we always take care of our own. And from that, the Madison Street Veterans Association grew. And we opened a Veterans Outreach Center, which was open to all veterans at that time. And then about a year later, we were offered some space in the building to open up Manor House, the Transitional Living Center for veterans experiencing homelessness. And at that point in time, it took us about 2 years, but we finally got some support from the VA. Interestingly enough, we were helping and supporting veterans, but for a long time there, they weren't sure whether we were too crazy or not. Some of the people in that area used to refer to us as the rowdy vets because we weren't just the normal people going along to, we were raising our hand and saying, hey, this isn't right, we need to fix this and let's make this better. So I'm very proud of the fact that I am the founder of Manor House. At a point in time when we just grew too big and we needed additional support, we turned that over to Catholic Charities Community Services, which has done an outstanding job. We had to move the building, we had to buy a new building, and they are now serving 76 veterans, providing space and resources to get people back into employment, to get people support for their substance abuse issues, whether that's alcohol or drugs, and just to reestablish life. So it's been a very successful outcoming, and I'm very proud to have been a part of that. Going back to my days in Vietnam, I was with the 9th Infantry Division. Anybody here had been with the 9th Infantry? Okay. So what's one of the key characteristics of I was in the Mekong River Delta, I don't know where you were. Give me a one-word example of what that was about. Pardon? Okay. What I'm thinking of is wet. We were wet all the time, rivers and streams and lots of rain, monsoon rains and so forth. So it was a tough terrain to be in combat operations, and I was the unit medic. Excuse me again. A little bit congested this morning, but all I can say about it is we were very heavily. How many Vietnam veterans in this room were exposed to Agent Orange? I'll bet every single one of you raised your hands. So, and I certainly was, and I could also ask how many people have health issues related to Agent Orange. All right, good deal. Don't ever give up. Let me tell you, I have type 2 diabetes and diabetic neuropathy and a couple of other things that they're watching me for related to Agent Orange. And I don't know how many times I went through the thing where you didn't have enough documentation when I put in for benefits and so forth, and it took years to get them to acknowledge some of the issues that I had. One of the things being in the Mekong River Delta, with all that water and being in the water all the time, is my feet were a mess. At one point in time, I had been on so many combat missions, and your feet never dry out, so they had to send me back. Our base camp was a Navy ship, and they would send us back to base camp to a Navy ship until my feet dried out, and then they'd send me right back out there again. So I still have problems with my feet related to that. The other question I have, are there any Vietnam veteran nurses in the room this morning who were nurses in Vietnam? I don't see any here, but I want to give them a shout out. When I first got in Vietnam, when I first got in country right after the Tet Offensive, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Tet Offensive, I was assigned to the 24th Evac Hospital in Long Binh, and I was only there for a few weeks, but I worked with the nurses, and I have such incredible respect for what they did. They would work long hours, 12 hours a day, no days off, no vacations, no any of that. And so I have enormous respect for the nurses and the work that they did, all throughout Vietnam. So anytime I meet a Vietnam veteran nurse, I thank them for not only for their service, but for the heart that they gave and the intelligence. And I learned a lot from them as an Army medic. I had 10 weeks of training in Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and I can remember sitting there and having a 4-hour block of instructions on how to make hospital corners on beds. which I never got a chance to use in Vietnam. I don't know why, but it just never happened. So they tried to train you for everything you could possibly imagine as a medic, regardless of where you were stationed. And so being with the Army nurses really helped me a lot. I also worked with the Navy corpsmen because we worked so closely with the Navy, even though we were Army. And I received a lot of training from them as well. They were better trained than the Army medics, so whatever I could get, I took. I spent a lot of time on combat missions with the 9th Infantry. I was looking at some of the information on the slides, which was very moving, by the way. Thank you for that presentation this morning. And one of the things I was thinking of is we were in Cambodia at the time that the President of the United States was saying, we're not in Cambodia. Oh, yes, we were. The people spoke Cambodian. The signs were all in Cambodian. Believe me, we were in Cambodia. So, they didn't know us tell the truth back home, but we knew what was going on the ground. So, and I'm sure a lot of you had similar experiences. The one thing that bothered me about the Vietnam War and subsequent wars, because this happens a lot when we send our troops overseas, is the lack of support in terms of supplies and making sure that everybody had the right stuff. I had bandages and supplies to use as a medic that were given to me by the Army that were, quite frankly, I don't know if they were from the Korean War or World War II, but they were completely unusable. So what I had to do is I wrote back home to my parents and I said, I want you to go down to the drugstore, Walgreens or somewhere down, and this is what I want you to give me, ace bandages, all of that kind of stuff. And I had them send me supplies, and that's how I kept myself supplied while I was in Vietnam as a medic. I remember walking out one day and some company commander came by. And the other thing I noticed on here, somebody said, you're traveling light. I traveled very light because my mission was to take care of people who got wounded, and so I didn't need a lot of stuff. So I remember one commander walking by and saying to me, soldier, where's your gear? Because all I had was a rolled up poncho on the back of my belt and my aid bag. I said, I got my aid bag, sir, that's all I need. And I wanted to be able to move fast and quickly and get to somebody when I needed to. And having all this, having 80 pounds of stuff on my back was not going to work. So I'm glad I did that. I don't know how I had the sense. I was only 20 years old when I went to Vietnam, so, but I wasn't stupid. So, I made sure I was doing the things that would help me to take care of our soldiers who were wounded in whatever way. The other thing is, of course, I have a lot of respect for those people that were manning the helicopters and so forth, because when I had to call them in, because I had somebody that needed to be taken into an evacuation hospital, they were right there, Johnny, on the spot. And it was very, very dangerous for them to do that because they would get shot at and so forth. And, but they were always right there. And I was always glad when they finally got there. And I could patch somebody up as much as I could, but they needed to go back to a hospital. So a lot of people did a lot of incredibly good work, and I'm very proud to have worked with Vietnam veterans. I can't think of anyone that I worked with at that time that I was in Vietnam with that didn't just do an outstanding job. I had a company commander that was an outstanding human being, very compassionate, but also very strong and a good person to work with and take us out into the jungles. The other experience I want to talk about in relationship to Vietnam that I don't hear an awful lot of veterans talk about is the relationship that we had with the locals. Most of the local people in Vietnam were just, poor people trying to, working their agriculture, trying to do what they could to feed their families and take care of each other. They really didn't understand a lot about the politics of this side versus that side and all of that kind of stuff. And there were some very, very incredible people over there that helped us out when we needed help. Kids that would bring us Coca-Cola, ice cold Coca-Cola. Oh my God, it was like manna from heaven at the time. When you're out there in that heat and you suddenly get a bottle of Coke. So the people were just wonderful people underneath it all, and I felt very bad about the fact that a lot of just ordinary people, everyday people raising families and trying to make a living would have to be caught up in this whole, this whole spectrum of different issues that were going on in the world at that time with the Cold War and beyond. And I think probably a lot of you may have had similar experiences when you were over there. I did everything. When we got in country, they took you into this big room, kind of like this one, and they told you all the do's and don't do this, don't do that, that kind of stuff. Don't drink the water, don't eat the food, don't interact with the locals and all that stuff. And I broke every single one of those rules, and I'm so glad that I did. C rations are not that great after a while when you've been eating them. So, and even the LRP rations, the LRP rations, were pretty horrible. So, if I could trade it for real food, I was always happy to do that. So, back to the States. One of the things. How many people in here have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, whether you're Vietnam veterans or otherwise? I know I do. I was in denial for a number of years about that, but when I started working with veterans 20 years ago, a good collaborator that I worked with who worked for the VA and had been around veterans a lot, with homeless veterans and so forth, he looked at me a few times and he says, I see a lot of symptoms in you of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I went, oh, no, I'm fine. No. And it took him about 2 years to work on me because he saw these different things and said, especially now that you're working with veterans, you really need to make sure that you're taking care of this. And then at some point in time, things just started falling apart personally for me. And I realized, okay, maybe he's right. Maybe I need to get some help for this. And I did. And I went to a vet center. Some of you have probably been to vet centers. And that helped me a lot, especially being in group situations with other veterans, other combat veterans. And we could talk about the experiences we had. It was hard at first because it's hard to, when you've hidden all of that part of your experience and that part of your life. I didn't even talk to my wife about it. I mean, she didn't even know I'd been through a lot of this stuff. And then suddenly you have to open up about it. It can be very painful, especially in those first few moments. But I knew as a veteran that was working with other veterans, in order to be able to help them, I had to be able to open up and express myself about my own experience because it would be helpful to them. So I did that, and it made a tremendous difference. And when I was running Manor House, I have since retired, but veterans would come into my office and tell me things that they wouldn't even tell their therapist, or wouldn't even tell somebody at the. And so we learned about another aspect of veteran experience called moral injury. I don't know if you've heard that term. But we were just at that point in time, this was about 15 years ago, beginning to understand what that was about, that it was related to post-traumatic stress disorder, but not quite the same thing. So especially working with some faith-based groups, which I have done a number of times, it really helps to have someone. I never saw a chaplain when I was in Vietnam. But I know they were over there, and I've known some since then that were chaplains, and they can do a tremendous amount of work to help somebody deal with moral injury and the effects of that. So, but the other thing I want to say about post-traumatic stress disorder, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people in this room that have experienced that and had to work with it. One of the things that disturbs me a lot, especially when I read the press about veterans and so forth, there's all this talk about veterans being broken and not being able to function and having post-traumatic stress disorder, and that keeps veterans from being able to get jobs and get work and get into the community in the way that they want to be, because people look at us and say, And I know they look like a walking time bomb, but we're not. You know, a lot of you in here, I'm absolutely certain, have done tremendous work in your lifetime, and also volunteer work in the community. So we really need to change that narrative about veterans being broken, because we're not broken. We went through some tough times, but we got through it. We're survivors and resilient, and we've done tremendous amount of work in the community. And whatever generations of veterans we have coming after us, it will be the same way. One of the things I say, you know, people ask me, why are so many veterans involved in community service? And I said, once you've answered that call to service, whatever the reason was, it stays with you for the rest of your life. So a lot of the people in this room and a lot of veterans in our community have stepped up and have done things both for the veteran community and for the non-veteran community. You know, I worked for a number of years at the Human Services campus, which takes care of all homeless people. It's the biggest campus in the state of Arizona for homeless people, and we always had people over there, veterans over there, stepping up for all the people that are experiencing homelessness, which right now we have a rise. You know, I'll just tell you, I'll get on my soapbox a little bit, but we have a rise in homelessness, especially amongst seniors, which really is disturbing to me, being a senior. And I see a few of you out there are also seniors. So, and the basic reason for that is the lack of affordability of housing. You know, rents have gone up tremendously, cost of housing has gone up, and so it's getting tougher and tougher. For instance, recently I was working with a woman who was 64 years old. She was not a veteran, but she'd raised 4 kids as a single parent, and she'd worked all of her life, and all of a sudden she didn't have enough income to pay rent. And her rent was raised about $500 or $600 a month, and she couldn't do it, so she got evicted. So the pictures that we have sometimes of people experiencing homelessness are of, you know, the alcoholics and the mentally ill people that are out on the streets. Those are the ones that are visible, but there are a lot of people out there that are struggling, especially now with the lack of affordability of housing. So if you can do anything on behalf of veterans that are in that position, or anybody in general, it's greatly appreciated. So the other thing I wanted to say about the Vietnam experience is that it was not the same for all of us. So I had gotten to the point where I was on so many combat missions that the company commander looked at me and said, you know, we've got to take you out of combat. Medics were not supposed to be out there as long as I was and still be alive. So he was afraid I was going to crack up because I had been on so many of those. So this was about 6 weeks before my tour of duty would be up. He put me on a thing called MedCaps. Anybody in here ever do MedCaps in Vietnam? MedCaps was one of those programs that we had to go out to the community in Vietnam and win over the hearts and minds of the local population. And basically what I would do is I'd go out to these little villages. I usually had only 3 or 4 people with me, and I'd have a whole box of medical supplies, and I'd set up in the middle of the village, and people would come up to me and tell me, you know, what was wrong with them, and I'd see if I had anything that could help them. You know, aspirin. Back in those days, we didn't have Tylenol, and we didn't have, you know, Advil. We had aspirin. So that was a very popular drink. I also had cough syrup. The problem with the cough syrup was that it had codeine in it, and somehow other people knew that. So it's amazing how many people came up with a cough. So, but I would run out sooner or later anyway. But anyway, I did feel like I was really helping and doing some good. I also gave inoculations to the people out there for TB and so forth. So we definitely did some good. One of the things I'm proudest the most of about veterans and being part of the veteran community is that when we are in a theater of operation, we do do what we can, especially for children. I mean, when we saw the children out there, you see World War II veterans giving out Hershey bars to kids in France when they liberated France, and all over the theater of operation. And we did the same thing in Vietnam. At one point in time, it was getting close to Christmas, and there we were all out there, out in the jungle and in the Mekong Delta, and we got together. My unit decided to get together and send home for toys and things that we could give to the children, and candies and cookies and things like that. So we put together a whole Christmas program for the children that were in the area that we were working in, and we set up in a school. And I think that's very common for American veterans to do. I don't know if other veterans do, but certainly Americans do. Especially when you see those kids out there, it breaks my heart sometimes when I think and hear about the different wars that are going on, and the children that are involved in that, and how many of them their lives are lost, or they're wounded forever and have these terrible things that they have to deal with. So I think we can all pat ourselves on the back for doing that, and definitely I can. Thank the World War II generation for doing that, because they really set the model for how that is being done. And I hope that will continue in the places that we may or may not have troops in the future. So one of the things I learned from working for so many years with veterans experiencing homelessness is that you feel sort of cut off from everyone else, and you feel sort of embarrassed about yourself because you're going through this. And when people come in and do an event like that, it just lifts everyone's spirits. So we had, I don't know if anybody here have heard of the Jewish war veterans. They do great work. They were one of the first organizations that helped support Manor House when we opened the door. And they would come in and do pizza parties. And it was a way of the community demonstrating to veterans experiencing homelessness that we still consider you one of us. You're still part of our team, and we love and care about you, and looking forward to seeing you get beyond the homelessness stage. So thank you for mentioning that. Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? All right. Again, I'm honored to be here today. Thank you all so much for the wonderful reception. Appreciate it. Okay.
Terry, we want to take this opportunity to present you with this certificate of appreciation, and this is a welcome to the Order of the R.E.D.
Okay, thank you.
And we hereby recognize and commend Terry Araman for his honorable military service, veteran support initiatives, and support of the East Valley Red Friday Patriots.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right.
And also, we would like to present you with this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is our Red Friday lapel pin, Terry, and we're hoping that you'll be able to display that frequently on your attire and promote this Red Friday program.
Glad you're doing that, not me. So.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the pin.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a round of applause for this gentleman? I do have a few announcements that I would like to make.
Oh, thank you.
Please be advised that we have scheduled guest speakers to join us for each Friday of April. So please plan to be in attendance and support our speakers and demonstrate our appreciation for their working with our program. Also, if you wish to place an order for one of the Red Friday shirts, get with Barry and Kelly after the meeting, and they will be happy to assist you. They can take your orders right up here at this table. I believe that all of the shirts that have been ordered thus far have been distributed, and Barry mentioned to me, we've got 2 still waiting. Jim Scheidt, which I don't believe is here today. Jim, you're here. We got your shirt ready. And Terry Heinrich, or Terry, are you here? Those are ready for pickup. $150?
A little more than that.
We've submitted orders for more than 150 of these shirts since we started this program, so that's good. That's getting the word out. Now all you need to do is order some black, some white, or some blue, and get those worn out there during the course of the week. Keep those reds ready for Friday morning. We are rapidly approaching the April 7th deadline to submit vendor surveys for Nancy Fassbender's 100X Fund Drive. And I sincerely hope that all of you will participate for this very worthy cause, the Arizona Veterans Honor Tour. And for those of you who have already submitted less than 75 surveys, which is the max they will allow you to submit, we're simply asking, please, please, please go online and submit at least 15 more. All right? Because we really want this fund drive to be very successful in supporting the 15 Arizona veterans that will have an all-expense-paid trip to Branson, Missouri come November. So, again, if you haven't reached your 75 max, please go online and at least do 15 more surveys. $1.60 for each survey you submit goes to the Arizona Veterans Honor Tour. To our guest, Roger, we thank you for joining us today and sharing in our camaraderie, and certainly hope that you will return as your time permits. Please know that you'll always be welcome here at our Red Friday program. As a final reminder, let's not overlook the importance of our Red Friday mission to keep our deployed warfighters in our thoughts and prayers, and to continue to demonstrate our support for these fine men and women. Enjoy your weekend.